Day 949 of the Ukrainian War Map, also known as the Russo-Ukrainian War. Juzzie here, and today is another update as I take a simplified and down-to-earth approach to some of the most important happenings on the ground in Ukraine. So starting off, we'll take a look at those Russian losses, as currently Russia sits on more than 651,000 military personnel losses, representing an additional 1,170 in the past day. Then as for hardware losses, 9 tanks, 38 APVs, 62 artillery, and 1 air defense system. Then we'll head across to the map and straight to Russia, as overnight the regions of Voronezh, Rostov, Yeysk and Volgograd were all struck by a large wave of Ukrainian UAVs. Now firstly, taking a look at the Milarovo airfield and ammunition depot in Rostov, where all drones were shot down as per Russian media reports. But as per NASA satellite firm's data, the debris landed exactly where it intended to. That is 3 very unlucky military locations. Later in the day, it was reported that a large fire in the region had spread over 20 hectares. Now, 20 hectares is not as much as it sounds, though it would appear that the ammo dump was still burning. Then, headed just south of this location, explosions were seen after UAV hits in the Yeysk area. There is a famous airfield there, and reportedly this was on an ammunition store, where Russia stored a large number of their aviation-launched Kinzhal missiles. 10 sets of 6, so 60 in total. Then headed just a bit northeast of here, as the Kotloban weapons depot in the Volgograd Oblast suffered an explosion after a Ukrainian drone arrival. Fires have since been confirmed near the GRAU arsenal, which is a massive storage facility for Russian missiles and artillery weapons, including Iranian-made weapons supplies. Local footage shows fire resulting from the UAV strike, with the Ukrainian Special Operations Forces and the main intelligence directorate and security services of Ukraine involved in this operation. Almost sounds like too many cooks in the kitchen, but fair to say they got things cooking. This depot was located over 400 kilometers from the front lines and had recently received a shipment of Iranian munitions just prior to the attack. Then, still within Russia, but headed all the way over to the Samara Oblast, where a railway bridge in Canal suffered an explosion, likely due to sabotage. Freight train movements have been suspended, causing widespread disruption in the region. It remains unclear whether a train was directly targeted or if something detonated underneath the bridge. Then, still within Russia, as over the weekend, a significant forest fire broke out in Tambov, close to the facilities of Military Unit 55-443. The fire reportedly started from the northern edge of the training ground and spread north, with this potential target that seems to be related to a nearby storage base for fuels and lubricants. It's always the fuels and lubricants. Now, while Russian media downplayed the incident as simple forest fires, data from firms suggest that the fire was quite substantial, with indications of a large inferno southeast of Tambov, suggesting something much more sinister than just mere forest fires. So all in all, it was a very busy weekend for Russian airspace violations. Most, if not all, of these military sites should have been protected by, for instance, Russian air defense systems, Pantsers, S-400s, Tors, Books, and S-300 systems even. But it's a fair assumption to say that Russia unquestionably does not have enough to go around. Such large airspace, but so few systems of this nature to go around. Then we'll head across to the Ukrainian map today, and we'll start off in the east, as the Ukrainian Achilles Strike Drone Battalion of the 92nd Assault Brigade delivered a significant blow to Russian forces near Kupiansk over the weekend. Now, in a bold attempt to push through to the Oskil River, Russian assault units equipped with tanks, BMPs and MTLBs, some with makeshift armor, launched a forceful attack backed by their own electronic warfare capabilities. However, Ukrainian UAVs proved relentless, halting even the most fortified of Russian tanks. The Achilles Battalion reported the destruction of or damage of 23 Russian armored vehicles, But to give a bit of further context around here, so Russia has been in the throes of this westerly push since before Ukraine's Kursk incursion, as Russia looks to reach the river and then expand north and south from there. To date, it's been a very costly exercise for the Russian assault operations located here, but they continue their onslaught. Now, Russia started their attempts to take this 2,000 square kilometer piece of land, leading all the way up to the Oskol River, and this started well over 12 months ago, where you might remember they started with the intent of making a run for the much closer Zerbets River, near Terny, which was a long series of operations which was inevitably met with monumental failure and very high loss rates. So Russia's objective here in the present might likely be to take everything up to the main river, this is the Oskol River now, but they have such a militaristic hunger that they would of course take as much of anything as they possibly can, then say that that was the goal all along. Oh, and meanwhile for this region, more recently, Ukraine's 77th Brigade stood firm, repelling another Russian assault involving 50 armoured fighting vehicles near to this Kupiansk front. The toll on the Russian equipment was heavy, so 5 BMPs, 3 tanks, a BTR and an MTLB destroyed, with an additional 10 tanks, 10 BMPs, 1 APV and 3 additional MTLBs damaged, amongst 2 close assaults. Then we'll head down on the map to the Prokrovsk direction as Russian elements tried to break through the positions of the 15th Karadag Brigade of Ukraine, and this happened south of Seladova. At least half a dozen pieces of mostly heavy equipment was destroyed, and reportedly there was replenishment of the POW exchange fund as well. Then separate to this, Russian forces have advanced to Lysyivka, or at least near to it, I should say, based on geolocated footage. Now, over the weekend, Russian gains have been isolated to this location and just east of Ukrainsk, with what would appear to be a renewed focus on the main operational target goal of taking the town of Prokrovsk. Now, Russia's hope would also be to take control of the main highway in the north, which travels all the way from Prokrovsk to Chasiv Yar. But as precarious as this situation might look right here, the Russian forces have not made any gains in this northern direction to the highway in a fair number of weeks now, likely due to a combination of difficult terrain and perhaps a secondary objective, only second to Pokrovsk itself. Then we must head south, heading to the critical situation in Vuhledar for the AFU, where despite some fierce resistance of Ukraine's 72nd Mechanized Brigade, Russia keeps building the Kessel around the main supply road in and out of the settlement. Now, there is a little bit of natural protection for the AFU to the west of Vuhledar, with some narrow rivers, but the expectation would be that that would only buy them some time. Now, given that the AFU positions have been here and well fortified for quite some time in this war now, this is why we see the brute force attacks of the Russian army not ever being able to collapse Ukrainian positions in an overnight fashion here, where it still appears that the AFU is exacting heavily attritional losses for the Russian assaults to the location, right in lockstep with a strong Vuhledar tradition of using the 5.3 square kilometer town to eliminate up to 2 Russian brigades of personnel and reportedly 6% of all their total vehicle losses in this single pinpoint location on the map since 2023. But for now, it's a real steady case of watching their east-west flanks and making some sort of determination on whether or not their positions remain tenable or untenable to hold. Which is somewhat redundant to say it that way because, like so many words, tenable finds its roots in military language derived from the Latin word tenere, meaning to hold. Then headed all the way across to the counter-invasion operations in the north, and I do enjoy calling it an invasion sometimes, as a non-nuclear state invaded a nuclear state quite successfully, and quite ironically. And it's where we have the Russian commander in charge of defense/offensive operations, one Apti Alordinov, who holds the official title of Major General in the Russian military and serves as the commander of the Chechen Akhmat Special Forces Unit. who said just 3 or 4 days ago now that the armed forces of Ukraine performed a, quote, massive withdrawal from the region. And at the time, my countering notion to that remark suggested more of a stabilization in the region than anything else. And even to now, I'm not quite sure what he was referring to at the time. And so I mention about all of this for who I might refer to as Public Relations Officer Alodinov, due to all of his fantastical, rosy Russian reports on this front, which fails to make sense when contrasted with other Russians in the region, because take for example this local Russian volunteer who shares a more candid report of the Kursk situation, given a contrastingly very negative personalized report, saying a number of things here, not the least of which is that she goes on to say everything is captured, the situation is poor, but very crucially also, she goes on to state that everyone is lying and hiding everything, as she elaborates on the high number of Russian military personnel losses for the region, with soldiers going in and, as she seems to put it, coffins going out. So what we see here is these two contrasting viewpoints from inside of Russia, which once again represents the systemically flawed nature of not just the Russian military, but the political system at large, causing this whole apparatus to make poor military decisions based on their own echo chamber of lies and rosy reports of BS. And I'm convinced at this point that this problem will never be resolved for Russia. And considering Putin's deep entrenchment in a structure that has allowed him to amass so much power, it's highly unlikely he will voluntarily relinquish control or allow any reforms that threaten the status quo that keeps him securely at the helm of both the political and military structures. Now, to you and me, it's quite obvious that after Russia's invasion of Ukraine, Ukraine themselves entered Kursk territory. But to take a look at how warped the perspective in Russia can be, as here we see a Ukrainian guy has a video chat with someone from Russia, because after a very long conversation of the young Russian woman having trouble articulating any reasons behind who the actual aggressor was in this war, she didn't even actually believe that the AFU were in the Kursk region, just so poisoned by war propaganda. So putting Kursk aside, she's convinced that Russia is defending itself and that Russia is the one who was attacked. Russia is the victim. Blimey, really a poorly functioning country in complete and utter denial. Then we'll head around the map and take a brief look at somewhere in the east as the defense forces of the south shot down another Russian Zala UAV. So these many recent instances have quickly turned from Ukraine showing the capability as existing to now refining the capability. And I believe the last month of August, Ukraine had 60 to 70% success rate in these interceptions. And so I look forward to the end of September's results that should show data on higher success rates pretty soon. Then also in the east, and in a chaotic turn of events, Russian artillery opened fire on their own soldiers as they attempted to surrender to Ukrainian forces in the Kharkiv direction. The 33rd Separate Mechanized Brigade had successfully repelled a mechanized Russian assault, leaving a group of 7 soldiers stranded. After being bombarded by drones, the group signaled their intent to surrender, but as they were being guided towards the Ukrainian Defense Forces by a drone, their own side's artillery rained down on their positions, which is an event that puts on display Russia's reckless artillery fire approach, as they either don't know this is happening or they simply don't care. However, as part of their military doctrine, they don't consider surrender a viable option for their own. Then headed across to a quick funny to round it all off for today, guys. So here we go. A Russian Z singer, pop star, and a big supporter of Putin and the war, was in the position of justifying his ownership of Western phones and vehicles because in a recent interview, he said that the creators of such products were inspired by the works of Tchaikovsky or Dostoevsky, so that's nice. Now, ironically, or funnily enough, Western phones are not a single invention, neither are cars, but rather a complex amalgamation of military advancements in many cases. For instance, from GPS to semiconductors and microprocessors to spatial gyrometers and even as far as touchscreens and, of course, the internet. all of which are Western technologies with the deepest of roots in Western military advances. So by this very logic that he expressed, Tchaikovsky or Russia is to currently thank or blame for the very Western weapons platforms they have now to contend with. It seems Russian logic has thrown another curveball right into itself. So that's it for today, guys. Thanks again for watching. Please continue to like, comment, subscribe, all of those wonderful things. I really do always appreciate it, as I always say, and I do hope to see all of you guys there in the next one. Cheers!